The smell hit the landlord before he even opened the door. Sweet, rotten, unmistakable. Inside apartment 4B, Detective Sarah Chan would find something that would haunt her for the rest of her career. A woman's body, perfectly preserved in ice, sitting upright at a dining table set for two. Across from her sat Michael Reeves, 34, calmly eating breakfast. He'd been living with her corpse for 47 days. This is the story of how loneliness can become something far more terrifying than death itself. Michael Reeves wasn't supposed to be a monster. That's what makes this case so deeply unsettling. He was the kind of man you'd pass on the street without a second glance. Average height, soft-spoken, the type who held doors open and apologized when he wasn't at fault. His coworkers at the insurance firm described him as quiet but pleasant. His neighbors barely knew he existed, but isolation does something to the human mind. It rewires it, warps it, turns ordinary thoughts into obsessions, and obsessions into something unrecognizable. Would you have noticed the warning signs? Would you have seen the darkness growing behind those unremarkable eyes? Michael had moved to Portland 3 years before the incident. No family, no close friends. His mother had died when he was 19, a sudden aneurysm that took her while she was folding his laundry. His father had left when Michael was 7, and he had no siblings. The psychological impact of losing his only attachment figure during crucial developmental years cannot be overstated. Attachment theory tells us that early abandonment creates what psychologists call an anxious avoidant pattern, a desperate need for connection coupled with a paralyzing fear of it. Michael's therapist notes, obtained during the investigation, painted a picture of a man slowly drowning in his own mind. He reported chronic feelings of emptiness. He described his life as watching a movie where I'm not really the main character. He talked about standing in crowded places just to feel less alone, even though he couldn't bring himself to speak to anyone. Classic symptoms of severe attachment disorder and dissociative tendencies. But therapy wasn't enough. The loneliness was eating him alive from the inside out. Enter Rebecca Walsh, 29. She was everything Michael wasn't: vibrant, social, effortlessly charismatic. She worked as a barista at the coffee shop below their apartment building, and she had a smile that made people feel seen. Rebecca had moved to Portland to escape an abusive relationship in Ohio. She was rebuilding her life, piece by piece, and she was doing it with remarkable courage. She was also kind. Dangerously kind. When Michael first spoke to her in the building's laundry room, she didn't brush him off like others had. She asked him about his day. She laughed at his awkward jokes. For the first time in years, Michael felt like he existed to someone. That single conversation became his entire world. Psychologists call this limerence, an involuntary state of intense romantic desire and obsessive thinking about another person. But in Michael's case, it went far beyond normal infatuation. His brain, starved of meaningful connection for so long, latched onto Rebecca with the desperation of a drowning man grabbing a life raft. He began timing his comings and goings to match hers. He memorized her schedule. He knew she worked Tuesday through Saturday, 6 a.m. to 2 p.m. He knew she went to yoga on Wednesday evenings. He knew she ordered Thai food every Sunday night. He wasn't stalking her, he told himself. He was just ... paying attention. Do you think this could happen in your neighborhood? Someone watching, learning, obsessing, and no one noticing until it's too late? Rebecca, to her credit, remained friendly but maintained boundaries. She'd chat with him in passing, but she never invited him into her life beyond those casual encounters. She had a boyfriend, Marcus, a graphic designer who lived across town. She was happy, she was healing. But Michael's mind was constructing an entirely different narrative. In his journal later recovered by police, he wrote, "Rebecca looks at me differently than she looks at others. I can see it in her eyes. She understands me. She's just afraid to admit it because of him, but she realizes eventually. We're meant to find each other." This is textbook erotomania, a delusional disorder where someone believes another person is in love with them, despite clear evidence to the contrary. The delusion becomes so powerful that the person reinterprets every interaction to fit their false narrative. A polite smile becomes a secret signal. A casual greeting becomes a coded message of affection. Michael's reality was fracturing, and no one knew. The night of February 14th, Valentine's Day, Michael decided to finally tell Rebecca how he felt. He'd planned everything meticulously. He bought flowers, expensive ones, the kind he'd seen Marcus bring her once. He wrote a letter, 7 pages long, detailing every moment they'd shared and what those moments meant to him. He rehearsed what he'd say, standing in front of his bathroom mirror for hours. He knocked on her door at 8:47 p.m. Rebecca answered in sweatpants and an oversized t-shirt, her hair in a messy bun. She looked confused to see him. "Michael? Is everything okay?" "I needed to talk to you," he said, holding out the flowers. His hands were shaking. She didn't take them. "Michael, it's kind of late. Is this important?" "It's Valentine's Day," he said, as if that explained everything. Rebecca's expression shifted, a flicker of understanding, then concern. "Michael ... I think maybe there's been a misunderstanding." "I know you feel it too," he interrupted. "I know you're scared because of Marcus, but Rebecca, we have something real. I see you. I understand you in a way he never could. What would you do in this moment? How do you reject someone gently when you can see they're teetering on the edge of something dangerous?" Rebecca tried. She really did. She was kind but firm. She explained that she valued their friendly interactions but that she was in a committed relationship. She suggested that maybe Michael had misread their casual conversations. She tried to let him down as gently as possible. But Michael's brain couldn't process rejection. It didn't fit the narrative he'd constructed. "You're lying," he said quietly. "You're just scared. But you don't have to be scared of me. I would never hurt you. I love you." "Michael, you need to leave," Rebecca said, her voice firmer now. "I'm sorry if I gave you the wrong impression, but this isn't appropriate. Please go." She closed the door. Michael stood in the hallway for 23 minutes, according to the building's security footage. Just standing there, staring at her door, the flowers hanging limply at his side. Something broke inside him that night. The fragile thread connecting him to reality finally snapped. For the next 2 weeks, Michael's behavior deteriorated rapidly. He stopped going to work. He stopped sleeping. His apartment became a shrine to Rebecca, photos he'd taken of her without her knowledge, printed and taped to every wall. He filled notebooks with obsessive writings, analyzing every word she'd ever said to him, trying to decode the real message beneath her rejection. His journal entries from this period are chilling. "She's testing me. She wants to see if I'm strong enough. If I really love her, I'll prove it. I'll show her that I'm not like the others who gave up on her. I'll never give up. Marcus is poisoning her mind against me. He's afraid of losing her. He knows she belongs with me. If I can't have her, no one can. That's not a threat. That's just logic. She's mine. She was always mine." This is the psychological point of no return when obsession transforms into possession, when love becomes ownership. Michael's sense of self had become so entangled with Rebecca that he could no longer distinguish where he ended and she began. On March 2nd, Michael broke into Rebecca's apartment while she was at work. He didn't steal anything. He didn't vandalize. He just waited. He sat on her couch in the dark for 6 hours, waiting for her to come home, waiting to make her understand. When Rebecca opened her door at 6:15 p.m., she didn't see him at first. She set down her bag, kicked off her shoes, walked toward her kitchen, and then she saw him sitting there in the shadows. She screamed. Michael stood up quickly, hands raised. "Please don't scream. I just want to talk. I just need you to listen." But Rebecca was already running for the door. She was fast, but Michael was faster. He grabbed her arm and she spun around, clawing at his face. They struggled. She was fighting for her life, and he was fighting for what he believed was his right to be heard. "Why won't you just listen?" he shouted, and his hands found her throat. He didn't mean to kill her. That's what he told police later. He just wanted her to stop screaming, to stop fighting, to stop rejecting him. He just wanted her to be still, to be quiet, to finally see him. But once his hands were around her neck, something primal took over. The rage of years of loneliness, of invisibility, of being unwanted, it all poured out through his fingers. Rebecca Walsh died at approximately 6:22 p.m. on March 2, 2019. Cause of death, asphyxiation due to manual strangulation. She was 29 years old. Here's where the story becomes truly disturbing. Michael didn't run, he didn't panic. He didn't call the police. Instead, he sat down on the floor next to Rebecca's body and cried. He held her hand. He apologized over and over. He told her he loved her. And then, as the hours passed and the reality of what he'd done began to sink in, his fractured mind found a solution. If he couldn't have her alive, he'd keep her anyway. Michael carried Rebecca's body to his apartment. He laid her on his bed and spent the entire night just looking at her, talking to her, pretending she was sleeping. But by morning, the reality of decomposition was setting in. The smell. The discoloration. He couldn't let her decay. He couldn't let her leave him. Michael worked in insurance, but before that, he'd studied biology in college. He knew about preservation. He knew about cold storage. He knew that if he could keep her cold enough, he could keep her present. He bought a commercial freezer unit online, the kind restaurants use. He had it delivered and installed in his living room. He told the delivery men he was starting a meal prep business. And then he did something that still makes seasoned detectives uncomfortable to discuss. He preserved Rebecca's body in ice, but he didn't just store her away. He positioned her. He dressed her in the clothes he liked best. He did her makeup. He styled her hair. And then he set her at his dining table across from his usual seat. For 47 days, Michael Reeves lived with Rebecca Walsh's frozen corpse. He ate meals with her. He talked to her about his day. He watched movies with her. He told her about his childhood, his dreams, his fears, all the things he'd never been able to tell anyone when they were alive to hear them. Would you have believed this was possible? That someone could normalize this level of delusion? His neighbors noticed nothing. The freezer unit hummed constantly, but in an apartment building, who pays attention to ambient noise? Michael continued to seem normal in his brief interactions with others. He even went back to work after a week, telling his boss he'd had the flu. The human mind's capacity for compartmentalization is staggering. Michael had created two realities: the outside world where he functioned normally, and his apartment where he lived in a delusion so complete that he convinced himself Rebecca was still with him, still his, still unable to leave. Psychologists who later evaluated him described it as a complete psychotic break with reality, combined with severe necrophilic tendencies, though Michael insisted he never touched her inappropriately. To him, she wasn't dead. She was just quiet, finally quiet enough to listen. The delusion ended on April 18th when Michael's landlord, responding to complaints about a strange smell, used his master key to enter the apartment for a routine inspection. What he found would require years of therapy to process. The landlord called 911, barely able to speak. When Detective Sarah Chun arrived on scene, she'd been a homicide detective for 12 years. She'd seen bodies in every state of decomposition. She'd worked cases involving torture, dismemberment, and unspeakable violence. But she'd never seen anything like apartment 4B. The freezer unit was running at full capacity, keeping Rebecca's body preserved in a block of ice. She was seated upright, dressed in a sundress, her frozen hands positioned on the table as if she were about to eat. Across from her, Michael's place was set with real food, a half-eaten breakfast, a cup of coffee, a newspaper folded beside the plate. The walls were covered in photos of Rebecca, both candid shots taken without her knowledge and images Michael had clearly posed with her corpse. In one particularly disturbing photo, Michael had positioned himself next to frozen Rebecca, his arm around her shoulders, both of them smiling at the camera. His journal was open on the counter. The last entry, dated that morning, read, "Rebecca and I are so happy together. She finally understands. She finally sees me. I knew if I was patient enough, she'd realize we were meant to be. Love always wins." Michael was arrested without incident. He seemed confused about why the police were there. When Detective Chun told him that Rebecca was dead, that he'd killed her, he shook his head. "No," he said calmly. "She's just sleeping. She's always been a heavy sleeper. She'll wake up soon." Even when confronted with the physical evidence, with the frozen body, with his own journal entries describing the murder, Michael couldn't accept reality. His mind had constructed such an elaborate delusion that the truth couldn't penetrate it. During his psychiatric evaluation, Dr. Patricia Moreno noted, "Mr. Reeves exhibits complete dissociation from the reality of his actions. He has created an alternate narrative in which Ms. Walsh chose to be with him, in which their relationship is consensual and loving. When confronted with evidence that contradicts this narrative, he experiences severe cognitive dissonance and retreats further into delusion. This is one of the most severe cases of erotomania and psychotic dissociation I've encountered in my career." The trial was brief. Michael's defense team argued that he was not guilty by reason of insanity, and the prosecution didn't fight it. The evidence of his complete mental break was overwhelming. Michael Reeves was committed to the Oregon State Hospital for the criminally insane, where he remains to this day. But here's the part that will keep you up at night. During a psychiatric interview 3 years into his commitment, Michael was asked if he understood what he'd done. If he understood that Rebecca was dead, that he killed her. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "I know what you think happened. I know what the evidence says. But I also know what I experienced. And in my experience, Rebecca and I had 47 perfect days together. She was finally mine. She finally saw me. And no one can take that away from me. Not you, not the courts, not reality itself." The psychiatrist noted that Michael smiled when he said this. A genuine, peaceful smile. "I'd do it again," he added softly. "If I could go back, knowing everything I know now, I'd do it all exactly the same. Because those 47 days were the only time in my entire life that I wasn't alone." This is the truly terrifying part of this case. Not the murder itself, but the complete absence of remorse. Michael doesn't see himself as a killer. He sees himself as a man who finally found love, even if he had to kill to keep it. Dr. Marino's final assessment concluded that Michael would likely never be rehabilitated because he doesn't believe he did anything wrong. In his mind, he's the victim, a man punished for loving too much, for refusing to accept loneliness. Rebecca Walsh's family held a memorial service on what would have been her 30th birthday. Her mother gave a statement to the press. "My daughter was kind to everyone. She saw the good in people, and that kindness was used against her. She died because she smiled at a lonely man in a laundry room." How do you process that? How do you make sense of a world where basic human decency can get you killed? There is no good answer to that question. The psychological implications of this case extend far beyond one disturbed individual. Michael Reeves represents something we don't like to acknowledge. The dark side of loneliness. The point where isolation becomes pathological, where the need for connection overrides every moral boundary. Studies show that chronic loneliness affects the brain similarly to physical pain. It triggers the same neural pathways, releases the same stress hormones. The brain, desperate to end the pain, can begin to malfunction in catastrophic ways. Michael's case is extreme, but the underlying psychology isn't as rare as we'd like to believe. Erotomania affects approximately 0.2% of the population. That's roughly 650,000 people in the United States alone. Most never act on their delusions. Most suffer in silence, their obsessions remaining internal torment rather than external violence. But some don't. Some cross the line from fantasy to action. And when they do, the results are devastating. Would you have noticed if someone in your life was spiraling like Michael? Would you have seen the signs, or would they have hidden in plain sight, their darkness invisible until it was too late? The truth is, we're surrounded by lonely people. People who feel invisible, unwanted, disconnected from the world around them. Most of them will never hurt anyone. They'll just suffer quietly, their pain unseen and unacknowledged. But a terrifying few will break. And when they do, someone like Rebecca Walsh pays the price. Detective Sarah Chun retired 2 years after the Reeves case. In her exit interview, she was asked what case haunted her most. She didn't hesitate. "Michael Reeves," she said. Because he wasn't a monster. He was just a lonely man who broke. And that's somehow more terrifying than any serial killer I've ever encountered. Monsters are easy to understand. They're evil. They're other. But Michael could have been anyone. He could have been your coworker, your neighbor, the quiet guy at the coffee shop. And that's what keeps me up at night, knowing that there are probably hundreds, maybe thousands of people out there right now, teetering on that same edge, lonely enough to break, desperate enough to do the unthinkable. And we have no way of knowing who they are until it's too late. She paused, then added, "Rebecca Walsh was kind to a lonely man, and it cost her everything." What does that say about the world we live in? What does that say about the price of compassion? Michael Reeves remains at Oregon State Hospital. He's considered a model patient, quiet, compliant, no behavioral issues. He attends therapy sessions and takes his medication without complaint. But according to his treatment team, he still talks about Rebecca. He still refers to her as his girlfriend. He still describes those 47 days as the happiest of his life. In his room, he's allowed to keep one photograph. It's a picture of Rebecca Walsh, smiling at the camera, taken from her social media before she died. Before she ever knew Michael Reeves existed. He looks at it every night before he goes to sleep. And he smiles back. The human mind is capable of extraordinary things: love, creativity, compassion, resilience. But it's also capable of extraordinary darkness. The same brain that can compose symphonies and cure diseases can also construct illusions so powerful that murder becomes an act of love. Michael Reeves loved Rebecca Walsh. He loved her so much that he killed her. He loved her so much that he kept her corpse for 47 days. He loved her so much that he destroyed both their lives. And in his mind, that love was real. That love was pure. That love was worth everything. That's the most disturbing part of all, not that he's a monster, but that he's not. He's just a broken human being whose loneliness became so unbearable that his mind shattered trying to escape it. Do you think this could happen in your neighborhood? Do you think you'd notice the warning signs? Do you think you'd see the darkness growing behind someone's eyes before it was too late? Or would you, like everyone else in Michael's life, just see a quiet, unremarkable man right up until the moment he wasn't? If you want to keep exploring the darkest corners of the human mind, you know where to find us. These stories aren't just about the crimes, they're about understanding what makes us human, even at our worst. Subscribe if you dare, because the next case might be even closer to home than you think.